Hey everyone, Coomber Radio, episode number 106. I am back with the foxy lady herself, Miss Rachel Guy. Miss Rachel Guy, hello.
Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. It's evening time here with me in sunny Sydney. It's been 36 degrees today on this fine spring day. And
All right,
yeah,
we're not.
hello.
I don't want a weather report.
Well, come on. All right, fine. I'll
Everyone's
shut
just
up
sitting
then.
there going, yeah. Tell us how nice and sunny it is.
No, I'll tell you why. Because before I left to go overseas to the US, I was wearing a hoodie and a jacket to go out. I've been overseas for 2 weeks. I return and I'm wearing hot pants and t-shirts. So that's how quickly seasons change here in Sydney. It's literally overnight.
Well, I'm wearing hot pants. It's just the people on YouTube won't be able to see it because I'm obviously filming from the waist up. But do feel free to use your imagination. Anyway, I need to apologise to the people listening.
Are they Jack Will's hot pants? Can I just ask?
No, they're not actually. Jack Wills haven't started doing hot pants. Not that I've seen. Not in the ones I buy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I need to apologise. Rachel was meant to be on the show last week, but as I explained to Rachel, I can't count. I did a plan for the podcast up until Christmas, and I put Rachel's name every other sort of slot, and then missed one. So we had two guests in a row. I'm sure you haven't actually noticed. I'm sure the people listening don't actually care. But I thought I'd apologise for the people that do care, because I know a lot of people will miss Rachel, the sound of her voice, and the stuff that we get up to on the podcast. But I hope you all enjoyed the Minimalists. After this podcast, our next guest is a guy called Alex Viana. A lot of you won't have heard of who he is, but he's going to have some very cool stuff to say. He's a guy that concurrently trains for marathons and is as strong as Hercules at the same time, which in theory shouldn't work, but it does. Rachel, I think we've got a fun-packed show today.
We do, as always, have a fun-packed show. Let's make it full of banter as per usual. I'm sure there'll be a few stories that come out as well today. So yeah, let's crack on with it.
Yeah,
I know one of the first things that we need to talk about is anti-inflammatory foods and some food haters.
Well, I want to bring it up because it's just getting a bit boring, and I know there's a huge amount of people in the UK that have sort of seen the sort of conversations that have started to go on, and all these blogs have started flying about, largely centered around, gluten sensitivity. Is it a myth? Because we know that there's a celiac test, right? And if you get a celiac test and you test positive, hey presto, a lot of the time you need to cut out gluten and other inflammatory foods. Now, there's obviously a huge amount of people that are on a gluten-free or alternative diet that cuts out a food group because they have some kind of symptomology that is an outgrowth of that food source. Now, there's an awful lot of coaches that are taking hold of the science that if you're not tested and you don't test positive for celiac disease, there's nothing to worry about, don't worry about it. All these people that are telling you to avoid inflammatory foods are idiots, essentially. And, I got caught up in a conversation online the other day, and I don't like to get caught up in conversation because it wastes my time. I've got better shit to do. But this guy started quoting a lot of my stuff, and he was digging up some really old articles. So I got involved in the post. People listening, some people might have seen this. So I got involved, and I sort of, defended my stance. And ultimately, I ended up saying, look, I'm not going to apologise for my approach. And I think it's really, really simple. I don't want to overly restrict anyone's diet. That is ridiculous. If someone can eat every food on the planet and eat it in a balanced format that provides for their performance goals and health, then brilliant. Do that. It's sensible, it's logical. If someone comes to me and they're presenting symptoms, they have issues, and remember, percentage-wise, a lot of people that come and find a coach of my nature are because they have symptoms, because they have problems. They're seeking my help. So I test these people and I say, look, we're going to do this, we're going to play around with some foods, we're going to go on a bit of an elimination diet, we're going to take stuff off, we're going to bring them back in, we're going to see what happens to your symptoms. Now, I do this process and we might find that they are problematic or have symptoms connected to gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, FODMAPs, whatever it might be. Anyone can be intolerant to anything. You can be intolerant to apples. You can be intolerant to spinach. You can be intolerant to bread. You know, it's not specific to any kind of food group. So my approach is, and it always will be this approach, and if I change my stance, you know, I will obviously update people, but I'm not going to get anyone to eat a food that creates a problematic response. Rachel knows, and we've talked about her IBS in the past, that she is not a celiac. But there's certain foods that react with Rachel, and she knows she needs to avoid them. I'm dairy intolerant. If I have a glass of cow's milk, I get a headache, I feel really tired, I look like I put on half a stone in like fluid around my waist. I haven't been tested for anything other than that I'm dairy intolerant. So people batting around going, you know, all these coaches that are telling you to avoid foods are absolute idiots. I'm not just standing there going, you know, don't eat that food. But what I have said in the past is, do you know what? I've noticed that an awful lot of people are quite reactive to gluten that have symptoms. I've also noticed that a fair amount of people have issues with dairy. So as a blanket statement, I'm going to sit there to a generalist population and say, do you know what? If you want to try and tackle this stuff and you don't want to pay for a coach or you don't want to, you know, read a book or whatever, just try this thing. Because if it's one thing that might help you, this might be the thing. And I think that's a very wise thing to do. I know it's not going to help anyone, but as a generalist bit of advice, you know, if I was standing at a bus stop with someone, I might say, just try and cut out gluten, try and cut out dairy, see what happens, because these just seem to be common offenders.
I'm just so sick and tired of the exact same thing and people making ridiculous blanket statements to try and make an impact. And that's all it is. It's just basically somebody trying to wave a red flag at a bull going, you know, oh, I'm going to stand up and say something different because that's what people want to hear, or that's what draws attention to themselves. And, you know, I just think that there is no one way. And, you know, as a coach myself, like, well, I mean, we do exactly the same thing. I certainly, when people come to me with problems, I do eliminate gluten, dairy, you know, onions, garlic, like random stuff from people's diet. And you know what? If it works, brilliant. I also have clients of mine who do eat gluten, you know, all right, in small amounts sometimes, some in more moderate amounts, depending on how much they can get away with. But it's all, there's no one size fits all. And so it does drive me nuts when people come in with these just blanket statements. And I, you know, like I said, I do think that this needs to be something that is, particularly on an elimination diet, you know, if we're going to get people really healthy from the start, and there needs to be ground level based nutrition.
I think all of this comes down to a percentage basis as well. So certain coaches work with certain areas or percentages of the population. Now, because of my journey and having looked at the whole gluten and dairy thing and other things that were problematic with me, I'm going to naturally talk about those topics quite a bit because they resonate with me. And then because I talk about that, I'm going to attract people that have a similar problem or journey or resonate generally with me. So the percentage chance of me working with people that have issues with gluten or dairy, etc., is going to increase greatly. So when I make statements like, let's say, and I've said this in the past, 60-70% of people I find that work with me have some kind of issue with gluten or dairy or some kind of food source. So I get that percentage from the people that I work with because of my work. Now, if you've got someone, for example, that, let's take Layne Norton. We've talked about Layne Norton as another example, and I like this example. You know, people have said to me in the past, you know, how did you tour with Layne Norton? Because he's kind of got different views to you with an approach to diet. And I said, he hasn't got different views, but his percentage of population that he works with is totally different to mine. I work with a bit more kind of, we'll call it broken people that have, you know, sort of gut issues, health issues, want to optimize their performance, sleep and well-being. Layne positions himself that he works in the orthorexic part of the fitness world. He works with fitness models and competitors, people that are overly anal about their food intake and generally need, and if it fits your macros approach to their nutrition, because they're scared of eating some chips or a burger or something else because they think they'll die. So the stuff that he talks about is a lot of if it fits your macros and based around the percentage of population that he advertises or promotes his work to. He doesn't sit there and not believe that, we'll call it quote unquote clean foods are good. He knows that they're good. Whole foods are good. They are the basis of anyone's diet. He knows that he wants to try and make people feel good, perform good, sleep well. But it's not as much of a focus of his angle because of the people that he just wants to help because of his market position. So again, his percentage bias is going to be biased in favour of his work when he talked about if it fits your macros and the application of that diet. My percentage bias is going to be the other way because of the people that I generally try to help. But if I started talking about Lane Norton's user group or someone else's user group, my percentages will change and my angle will change based on the people that I'm trying to attract or listen to my work.
Well said.
But
I think as well, people have to remember that. Let's talk about celiac here. Okay, celiac is a severe autoimmune digestive disorder, and people always think that I can eat gluten because it doesn't affect my tummy. But when we look at inflammatory foods, they can affect you in so many ways. I mean, we talked about, you just talked about your dairy, and I know when you came to Australia, I was eating ice cream and you couldn't even have an ice cream. And that, this is where I think the education needs to come through, that it's not just digestive problems, it's water retention, it's brain fog, it's feeling lethargic, it's feeling tired. There's a whole heap of other things that go along with this, aching joints, feeling nauseous. And sometimes it's not directly after you eat the inflammatory food. Sometimes it can be a couple of hours later. It can even be a day later. It can affect you sometimes 2 to 3 days later, which is why, again, we have to go back to an elimination diet with the type of clients that both you and I work with, which actually I have to say, particularly with females, is probably the majority of the population, including fitness models and competitors. I know so many fitness models and competitors that actually have more digestive dysfunction and gut issues than most women. But we have to strip back to basics, and actually people generally feel so much better once they've removed these inflammatory markers out of their diet, not just digestive system wise, but sleep, health, and overall function.
Yeah, I just think the whole arguments that have popped up and why we started talking about this stuff is just a little bit sad, because as practitioners, especially people that are trying to educate others, we're always trying to say why can't we agree on things? Why can't we just try and help people? Why do we have to, sort of name and shame other people? Which is essentially what happened. Someone said, Ben Coomber said this and Ben Coomber said that, and it's not true. Look at this research study that shows celiacs, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, at no point have I tried to, really push an agenda. But what I've tried to do is say, do you know what? I've noticed that there's a huge amount of people that seem to be reactive to this. And all I've ever really said to people is, look, try it. Just try it. See what happens. See what changes. See how you feel. If nothing changes and you feel the same and it didn't make an impact, great. It didn't work. My sort of one size fits all recommendation to a lot of people didn't work for you. But if it works for 60, 50, whatever percentage of other people, at least I've helped a fair amount of people with a generalist recommendation that will essentially be fairly accurate for a lot of people. So I want to see people posting about this stuff. I don't want to see people not posting about it, but people need to post a balanced argument. This will happen in this population of people, this will happen in this population of people, but essentially you need to go away, you need to try it, and you need to find something out about yourself. And that's one of the reasons we talk about an elimination diet, is because you find out a huge amount about yourself when you do it. You just learn, you go on a process, you go on a journey, you look at food in a different way, and I think that's another very powerful thing, whether you end up being that restrictive in the future or not. I just think it's a journey a lot of people should and could go on to benefit their health.
I think as a coach, whichever thing you follow, or whatever your values and purposes and whatever your stance is in the fitness industry, if something works, who cares? If it works for somebody, does it really matter? And why do we need to be arguing about this on Facebook and social media? I mean, God, I can't even remember the last time I engaged in a debate on Facebook. I just can't be bothered. But if something works, I mean, I personally, I don't follow. Let's just say I don't follow the paleo diet, right? I just don't. It's not that I have anything against the paleo diet. It hasn't worked for me, and for a lot of my girls and my population that I work with, they don't follow the paleo diet. There's elements of paleo in there, but that doesn't mean that I'm against paleo. For a lot of people, paleo works really well. Good on them. So I just think that if something works for somebody, why knock it? If it fits your macros and you want to count your proteins, carbs, and fat and your calories, that's fine. Go and do it. Good on you. But it's not something that I want, that I promote. But that's fine, and I think that we need to get a little bit more balance, really. If something's going to work, awesome.
The funny thing is, these are the same kind of coaches that would, vilify or be negative towards someone using a certain protocol that ended up working for them. Now, there's a huge amount of success that people obtain from non-optimal environments. And, this is where I can only stand back and clap my hands at some of the people that have had success with companies that I dislike. Let's say Herbalife, Body by V, things like this. There's loads of people that have found health and change in these kind of products. Everyone knows I do not think it's the ideal way to go about things, and I will continue educating other people on why I think real food is the real answer. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be a percentage of people that will use Herbalife as a route to get somewhere and then find a better path from there on. What I don't like about the Herbalife side of the business is the promotion that it is the answer and that it is the solution and that people buy into it. It's that side of the company that I hate and I talk a lot about online. But I'm never going to stand there from someone who's lost 10 stone and said, Herbalife changed my life, and gone, man, you're a dick. You did all that with the shake and you should have eaten, chicken, broccoli and rice. No, they shouldn't have. We have to stand back and we have to clap our hands and we have to say, well done. I implore you for your efforts. But I think here is a more optimal way that we can move on now and that you can evolve and find some more consistency in a healthier way. And these are the kind of coaches that would do that kind of thing. And I just think it's a little bit sad.
I could not agree more, which brings me to something that actually came up last year. Let's just talk about The Biggest Loser for a second. Now, The Biggest Loser has a bad rap in the fitness industry. Oh, you shouldn't train your clients like that. Your clients shouldn't be eating a low-calorie diet. Okay, I get that and I understand that. Let's talk about the type of people that are on The Biggest Loser. When you have, and I know this from inside information because I'm actually good friends with a lot of the trainers actually on The Biggest Loser Australia, so I know exactly what goes on behind the scenes, etc., etc. So when we have a look at the contestants on The Biggest Loser, these people are at the end of their tether. They are desperate. A lot of the time they are mentally and emotionally, well, obviously to get that big, it's a lot of mental and emotional problems and issues. Sometimes you need such a big impact with somebody like that to be able to get a result. Now, something that came up, I believe it was last year actually on social media, was particularly something The Biggest Loser in Australia. One of the trainers advised that his contestants should be eating Weet-Bix and skim milk for breakfast. There was complete uproar from all of the trainers in Australia saying, Weet-Bix and skim milk for breakfast is an unhealthy breakfast. They should be eating poached eggs or, steak and nuts and all of this kind of stuff. And I just sat there and I was thinking, hang on a second. Let's just have a look at the type of people that watch a show like The Biggest Loser. We're talking about people here who are going from eating ice cream for breakfast, McDonald's, KFC, really, really shit junk food. The type of people who watch The Biggest Loser are also usually from a lower socioeconomic environment. So really, what is the next best thing? Let's take them from eating ice cream and all sorts of other shit for breakfast, or not even eating breakfast at all, and get them eating a cereal. All right, it's cereal. It's not something that I would advocate for my clients, but again, population specific. Let's get them eating Weet-Bix with some skim milk. That is the next best thing for them. It is a stepping stone. Once they finish on The Biggest Loser, if they started with a private coach, of course, then just like your Herbalife example, you start them there. You start educating that client on nourishing health and nutrition. But people have to realize there's a stepping stone there. You can't just go from eating ice cream and macas for breakfast to eating like, an organic fillet steak that's grass fed and blah blah blah. There has to be small stepping stones along the way. And so, to look at something like that and say, oh, well, it's the wrong thing to do. I actually don't think it's the wrong thing to do in that situation. I think it's probably the sensible thing to do. It's, what's the next best thing, or what is better than the alternative, which is ice cream and macas, as an example.
Definitely. I think I had my eyes open to that a while ago. When I was consulting and helping out the Move Eat Treat movement in the UK, and I come from, again, a certain population. I work with a certain amount of people, and my opinions are kind of based on that. And sometimes, or especially when I was, we'll call it, not as mature as I am now as a coach. I've sat down with some of the people that work in the NHS and deal with people that are, metabolically broken, which is what we're talking about now. And he sort of sat down with me and said, you've got to realise, where these people are coming from. They're totally different users to you. They're on low income backgrounds. Again, the socioeconomic sector is totally different. And he opened up my eyes and sort of made me mature about the potential of other people and the struggles that they have kind of overnight. Because especially you look at trainers in Australia. Especially if you're working out of like Brisbane, Sydney, up the Gold Coast, you're working with people that have good incomes, are kind of already sort of bought into the idea of exercise and getting outdoors and in the sun and that kind of stuff. And these people, telling them to eat asparagus, eggs and salmon for etc. for breakfast is, it's kind of like, all right, that sounds pretty good. I'll be up for that. But you can't go and recommend that to someone that's of a totally different background. And when we talk about change in habits and actually getting people to just adopt really simple habit change, like you mentioned, the perfect thing for them is probably just a bowl of cereal for breakfast. And and these might be the people that might have been having 3 bowls of something really high calorie, like a chunky, nutty type cereal. So just making those simple restrictions is definitely the right thing to do for these people. So, the more severe the change, the more likely you are to scare these people off from the change because it's so alien. And the last podcast I spoke with the minimalists, and we talked a lot about people's magnitude of change, and that's how it makes people fail. If you try to do too much change at once, you get in there, you start getting stuck in, and then you realise it's just too much. Like, especially with people going to the gym, some people, they're not going to the gym, and then all of a sudden they're going 4 or 5 days a week. That's a big change. That's like an extra 10 hours out of your week to go and exercise with gym travel time and that kind of thing. That's a huge amount of change. And, with everyone and with certain people, we just need to do 1 or 2 things at a slow baby step way.
I agree. It's been a good conversation.
I think it has. Yeah, so I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully, most people that kind of follow my work listen to this podcast, so hopefully that'll outline mine and our thoughts on the matter, and I won't be engaging any more conversations online about it because I got better shit to do. Right, Rachel, shall we crack on with the questions on this podcast?
Yes, let's do that. Now, this next question is from Chris Knight from Brighton. And again, we're going to continue on the theme of inflammation. And this time we're going to talk about anti-inflammatories. So, hi, Ben and Rachel. Thanks as always for the podcast. This is less of a question and more of a concern, which I think could be something that your audience could easily be impacted by. I thought I'd throw this over to you to validate and maybe share because my observations are based on a recent experience and having since discussed the issue with other people, including a GP and a surgeon. So the concern, it is about the anti-inflammatory drug called naproxen, widely prescribed by the looks of it as a default NHS GP prescription for people that have inflammation and something that is easily required if you have a sports injury. So the story. I've recently injured myself in a gym doing kettlebell burpees, despite having warmed up with dynamic stretches and practice runs of interval an interval training circuit. To cut a long story short, I have got a severe strain or tear in a lower back muscle, which has been causing me issues, compounded by a 3 to 4 hour daily return commute and a desk job. I went to the doctor and I was signed off for my commute, but I was also prescribed painkillers plus naproxen as an anti-inflammatory. I generally try to avoid medication, but on this occasion I felt that it was needed. After a few days, I got a terrible acid reflux in the gut, so I decided to stop taking them, and I have needed to take a lot of Gaviscon heartburn and indigestion remedies since. I have discussed my issue with a close friend who subsequently told me they had also taken this drug, and they are now prescribed tablets for their acid reflux, which they've been taking for a long time. I also know a GP and a surgeon who have recently told me this is a really bad drug, but only used because it's the cheapest option. I've checked websites since, and there are warnings there, but just like there are for many other regular drugs that have side effects which rarely occur. So the point of my story, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that this appears to be a really bad drug. I don't think I would have questioned the prescription even if I had checked online first, and I think that people should be made aware that people should be made aware of this particular drug and perhaps learn from my mistake. I'm pretty sure your listeners are liable to injury, and hence I felt the need to write in. And it would be good to hear what steps I could have taken to prevent this. But as stated, I don't think the internet makes the side effects stand out any more from any other side effects of other drugs. I'm now getting physio, but I've been out for 4 weeks. So I have to do this growl sound, by the way. He says grr, which basically means I think he's indicating his frustration for not being able to train. So I'm going to go grr, okay, rather than grr, because it sounds wrong. Chris, you're making me feel like a dickhead here. Anyway, I digress. So the follow-on question. Any ideas on how I can stay fit and maintain muscle during this injury? My lower back and right side of my core are out of action. I always start with a compound move or movements, and I can't support or stabilize myself with deadlifts, squats, and bench, etc. Double grr. Don't make me say this at the end.
Do it.
You say it. Yours gurringly.
Chris Knight.
Chris Knight Bryson. Stop it. On YouTube, this is going to look okay, but I'm sure on audio, people are going to be going, what the fuck?
I thought this was quite a good question, and the reason why I wanted to kind of expand on it is I've just been through the exact same thing as Chris. I've never had a back injury. I've never really taken any bad painkillers or had to take any bad painkillers before. So I kind of looked at this question and I was like, I've just been through this exact thing and I'm going to share what I did. Now remember, this is what I did. This isn't medical advice. This isn't to be taken as gospel. This is just what I did and it's what worked for me, and these are the steps that I had to take to get myself back as quickly as possible. So, Chris had a lower back tear. I didn't have a tear. I had nerve and muscle spasms around the SI joint that pulled it all together so much that I couldn't walk for a good 5 or 6 days until I got an osteopath appointment. The key thing definitely that got me back on my feet was finding a really good osteopath. And me and Rachel have ranted before about the quality of who you go and see is so important. This guy that I saw is about £40 per half, about £40 for 40 minutes. Sometimes I was only in there 10 minutes. It was a crack and a bend and a hump and a hoop and a hup. And, I was already walking a bit better every time I went out. So it's really important to pay for someone there. Pain-wise, now obviously it's great that he's told us this. If the NHS are issuing this drug, naproxen, we need to be aware of it. It's cool. So be aware of it from now on. I personally was taking paracetamol and ibuprofen for a while, and it wasn't touching the pain. It wasn't really getting there. And I got hold of some codeine, which is very traditional for sports injuries as well, because it's sort of anti-spasmodic as well. All that it didn't do anything. It just made me drowsy. So after 2 days, I knocked that on the head. And I got hold of some tramadol. And for me, and this is what I would do again if I had a similar injury, the tramadol worked fantastically. It was brilliant. It allowed me to walk. It allowed me to move. And ages ago, probably again in my immaturity of a coach, I would have said, oh, we shouldn't be taking these kind of painkillers. Yes, it can cause problems with the gut lining and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it can, but when you're in pain, you need to move. And being in pain can make you very depressed very quickly. And I realised that my overall well-being and mood, it dropped dramatically. All of my lifestyle choices that make me feel good disappeared overnight. I couldn't walk my dog outside. I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't play rugby. I just sat on my ass all day and kind of just worked. It's all I could really do. Watched a bit of telly, went out for dinner with the aid of my girlfriend, went to a spa, and I had to be dressed, by someone else in the spa because I couldn't bend or do anything to get changed. So, taking these kind of painkillers is really important. So I ended up taking tramadol. And then in terms of an anti-inflammatory, I also took a high-dose broad-spectrum curcumin supplement that I got from Nutri, which is a company I use a lot. It's practitioner only. But I found that was good as well. Obviously, it's very hard for me to quantify how this was good, but I felt it was benefiting. And then apart from that, I just had to keep doing the stretches that I was told to do, which was not a lot. The manipulations at the osteo was the most important thing, and then just keeping on top of the painkillers and resting. Getting out of bed is still a tiddly bit painful, and I'm about 3 or 4 weeks since the injury now. I squatted last night for the second time, and I squatted 90 kilo or 85, 90 kilo for 5 reps. So nothing to write home about, and I know it's quite a journey. I haven't dared to deadlift yet because of that type of movement. But one thing I wish I'd have done, and the reason why I didn't do this is because I sat here as kind of a fitness professional and thought, oh, I'll be back on my feet in a week. I'll get an osteopath appointment and I'll sort myself out. And the one supplement that is great when people are injured and essentially bedbound is HMB. It's good at preserving muscle mass in people that are injured. So I wish I would have bought some of that. I definitely lost a bit of muscle, not loads. I kept my protein high. I obviously dropped my calories. I didn't gain any weight while I was being injured because I adjusted my calorie intake. But that's probably the only thing that I wish I would have done outside what I did otherwise.
It's a lot of I completely agree with you. Like when somebody's in pain, you need to take medication, and like I'm all for natural sources and things as well. But when an injury is that severe, you need medication. We're not living in the dark ages anymore where this stuff isn't available. But yeah, I think if there are other alternatives other than naproxen, and just Ben, I'm exactly the same as you. I tore my hamstring back in March. It's something that I wish that I'd done as well. I thought, oh well, I'll be back in a couple of weeks, and still my hamstring is a problem today. I've actually lost a lot of muscle on my glutes and my hamstrings. Now, I've actually lost 2.5 inches off my glutes since March, which is horrible news.
No, the glutes.
Boo! Sympathy. So it's something that we all need to do and make sure that preserving muscle mass is as best possible. And keep moving, which is why anti-inflammatories are so important. Yeah. So, and I mean, look, if you ask a lot of doctors how to, who do prescribe naproxen, I mean, sometimes they even prescribe a proton pump inhibitor as well, which basically reduces stomach acid. And so, therefore, you're not just now taking a painkiller, an anti-inflammatory. You're also now taking a proton pump inhibitor. So, there's so many, and I'm sure that's got side effects as well. In fact, I know it has. So, you have all of these things stacked together. If you are on anti-inflammatories, let's just talk about ibuprofen, for example, as a very generic one. You should eat when you're taking anti-inflammatories, okay? Like that's the pretty standard rule that your gran or your mother would have told you, when you were growing up and you had like rugby injuries. Oh, well, if you take this one, then you must eat when you take it. So don't take these things on an empty stomach. Even if you have a glass of milk, something like that. When you're taking anti-inflammatories, make sure that you eat when you're taking them. Yeah.
When I needed the tramadol that I originally got, I got off a friend. You shall remain anonymous. And when I wanted more painkillers, I went back to the doctor and I said, I've got pain. I said, I've taken some tramadol, and it worked really well. I've taken X, Y, and Z. Is it okay if I have tramadol again? And the doctor said, yeah, because you found it effective, I'll write you a prescription of tramadol. Whereas before, he probably would have gone to something else. Like, he might have gone to naproxen, I don't know. But because I'd sat there and requested and said that it had been effective for me, he happily wrote the prescription. So if something's been effective for you in the past, then do say that to your doctor, because they should honour that. Because again, every individual will react differently to a painkiller, just like food. So don't think you can't ask your doctor for that.
Absolutely, and there are some great doctors out there as well. I mean, I think that sometimes the fitness professionals in particular, like sometimes they speak. Let's just say they don't speak too highly of doctors, which I think is frankly quite ridiculous. When somebody spent 5 years plus at university and God knows how long studying, they know far more. Usually, when it was certainly pharmacology, they know a lot more than your average trainer. So I think we have to respect that with the doctor as well. But certainly going in there and asking for something, most doctors will discuss these things with you, and they should discuss the full side effects with you as well. So awesome.
Next question.
Awesome. Okay, the one thing, doing kettlebell burpees, is probably something that I wouldn't recommend as part of a training plan. But that's my personal opinion as a coach.
Okay.
Try and find something else to do instead.
We'll glaze over that one.
Okay. Okay, this one is from Phil. All right, Ben and Rachel, I hope all is good. What are your views on heating or cooking food in a microwave? In Paul Chek's book, Eat, Move and Be Healthy, he advises against it. I'm sure it changes the molecular structure in food to something your body recognizes. Be cool to hear what you guys think. Thanks, Phil.
Quite a quick one for me, really. My opinion, having read Paul's book in, I suppose, my immaturity as a nutritionist, would be to kind of, believe that. It kind of made sense at the time. You do have to question cooking methods, and microwaving is very different to just standard convection oven heating or frying or boiling, which is direct heat application. But there was a guy, and I've tried to find him on Facebook this morning. He was a fitness professional that I used to talk to quite a bit in kind of my early days, and he did a really nice blog post looking at all the studies around microwaving and whether it actually changes food and whether it affects us. And he came to the conclusion that it doesn't, that we shouldn't be worried about it. And I looked at all the studies that he sort of cited as part of his blog review, and I was really happy. And ever since then, I've kind of formalised my microwave recommendations based off his blog post. Now, I microwave myself. I'm more than happy to microwave. The only thing I will not do is microwave in plastic. We know that plastic is full of some nasty stuff, BPAs, parabens, all sorts. And when you heat that up, you increase the chances of that leaching into the food by an awful lot. So I would stick it in a glass dish, ceramic, whatever is better than plastic or alternative to plastic in your environment, and do it that way. And that's kind of my opinion, really. It's pretty black and white.
Cool. Enough said.
Enough said.
Next question. This question is from... This is another question from Phil. I think it's the same Phil.
He was being greedy.
This is a really good question, and I've got lots to say on this one. Hi guys, my girlfriend is pregnant, and the aim is to eat well for the duration as we normally do anyway. The problem is she cannot stomach anything. The sight of any greens or meat makes her gag. She's constantly burping all day, and her stomach is going crazy, burbling away inside. Have you got any experience with pregnancy and healthy eating, and what foods do you recommend for optimum nutrition? Would you say it's advisable to go organic? Keep up the good work, Phil.
Well, I would definitely refer people to episode 104, where me and Anna talked on pregnancy for quite a while. But otherwise, it sounds like Rachel has some things to say.
Yes, I do. First of all, when it comes to pregnancy, you should not be force feeding yourself. And I think that this is some general advice to new mums, and you become a mum the day that you conceive. And I also think that sometimes with the boys, you don't actually become a dad until the baby is born, and that's sometimes how it feels. Like, the mum has a lot to deal with. So the first thing you should do is not feel guilty about, you shouldn't feel guilty about not being able to eat your normal diet. There is a whole cascade of events that happens when you fall pregnant. Your hormones go crazy. You'll be craving foods that you would never usually crave, and that's okay, particularly during the first trimester. I don't know how pregnant Phil's girlfriend or wife is, but my guess is it's probably going to be in the first trimester. So the first sort of 12 weeks is usually when you'll get the cravings and the funny tummy and the, feeling nauseous and sick all of the time. That's normal. So in terms of nutrition during the first trimester, of course, we always want to try and aim for the healthiest foods possible. But then at the same time, you shouldn't feel guilty because you can't eat those foods. So we have to look at the next best option. I know a lot of women crave things like dry toast or toast with peanut butter on. Again, let's go back to the conversation we had earlier. If you're going to have toast, try and have a gluten-free toast. If you're that way inclined and you need to be on some form of an elimination diet. But I can tell you now, I've had women who previously came to me and they were on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet and they did really well. They fell pregnant and all of a sudden they were craving gluten-filled products, and yet they were fine and they didn't have any side effects. So I don't really think there's a black and white answer here. I think we have to call this a shade of grey. Of course, we want to go for the healthiest foods possible, but at the same time, the mum needs to eat as well. So is it better to eat and force herself to eat meat and vegetables when she's going to, because when you become pregnant, you physically can't eat these foods. I know girls who've loved poached eggs, for example, for breakfast. They fall pregnant and then all of a sudden they're completely repulsed by it. Coffee is another one. Most women crave a coffee first thing in the morning. You fall pregnant and the smell of coffee makes you very, very nauseous. So you have to be very aware of these things. So first trimester, do what you can to get through, I'm afraid. And, you've got to eat what will make you feel most comfortable.
I think the message that I would write with this is the same message with kind of fussy individuals, which we've mentioned on the podcast before, and that, we all know that optimal health comes from a variety of different foods and of good balance to get all the different micronutrients that we need. So there's obviously going to, it's not a fact that she can't stomach anything. There's obviously some stuff that she can stomach. And what I would do is literally get a massive list of foods and go through this massive list of foods with your girlfriend, wife, partner, and say, right, can you stomach this? No, 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 yes, no, yes, yes. And then hopefully you'll have a list of, even if it's like 5 foods that she can eat. And the best thing that you can do in this situation is just focus on those foods. Focus on those real, good, wholesome foods. And then when those cravings or feelings of what you want to eat change, then change the food list. You might end up with a list that is just chicken, sweet potato, milk, dark chocolate, and I don't know, shredded wheat. Who knows what the list might be? Just focus on those foods. See how you can incorporate them, and just know that that is the best that you can do in your situation right now. It's not ideal. It's never going to be ideal, but you're doing the best that you can, and you can guarantee that you're getting a protein content and a good fat content, and all the things that that person needs just to support healthy metabolism and the growth of a new child.
Yeah, and it's very unlikely that through the entire pregnancy she will have certain cravings. Like I said, after the first trimester, perhaps even up to 16 weeks. Usually after that, cravings settle down, and they may come back one day here, 2 days there. You might have a week here, but generally speaking, things do settle down after that first initial sort of 12 to 16 weeks.
Cool. Well, hope that helped.
I think definitely the feeling guilty thing is a big one, particularly women who are used to training and used to eating a very clean diet feel very guilty when they fall pregnant that they can't eat like that anymore. And I think that it needs to be said that it's okay. You're now pregnant, and it's okay. Your body's going to tell you what you need to eat.
Definitely.
Cool. The last question, this is from Gethin Lloyd Evans. He sounds very Welsh.
He does, yeah.
Just so.
And seeing as he plays rugby, there's a high probability he might be Welsh.
Yeah, exactly. Should I speak in a Welsh accent for this one then?
Yeah, go on.
All right. Oh, do you know what? It's been a while since I did a Welsh accent, so I might have to practice it a little bit. Hello, Ben and Rachel. No, I can't do it because I talk so posh British when I speak to you. Okay, I'm going to make fun of all the Welsh people now because I can't speak in my own language anymore. That's terrible. I've got this like hybrid, very posh British when I speak to you, crossed with a bit of an Aussie twang, and the odd Welsh thing come out here. Anyway, I love the podcast. What if he's not Welsh?
We made an error, but it'll be funny.
Fuck, I don't want to listen to this one back over. Okay. I love the podcast, and I put a lot of what you said into practice, and I find it massively beneficial. Stop laughing at me. I can tell you're laughing at me, Benny. I have one quick question, as a majority of my queries have already been addressed in previous episodes. As you play rugby, I assume you've played sevens. Although it's great fun, it's very physically challenging and it can also be a pain in the ass. As most of the time, you have no idea how many games you will be playing, and therefore how much rest you will have in between the games until you actually turn up on the day. Therefore, it's really hard to plan your nutrition. Do you have any tips on what to eat and how to structure food throughout the day to maximise performance and recover between games? Cheers. How did I do?
Oh, it was beautiful. It's quite a subdued Welsh accent. I suppose it wasn't overly Welsh. I think you were afraid of really, really getting stuck in there.
I'll have to practice. I'll have to practice a bit more then, because I don't talk to any Welsh people here anymore. So I don't have any Welsh friends here really. So I think I'm going to have to practice. I'll talk to my Welsh friends later.
We'll practice with me before the next podcast because my Welsh is amazing. So
you sound Indian when you try and speak in a Welsh accent.
I'll give over.
Come on then, right? Go on, reply in a Welsh accent. This will be funny.
No. This is a good question. I think my recommendation is going to be pretty simple and short, to be honest. The biggest thing that you need to obviously provide for in a game of sevens is your overall energy demands, and you're just going to have to roughly calculate it. Like a game of sevens, like a day's tournament of sevens can be very intense, so I'd probably get your caloric intake for that day and probably double it. You know, it's really intense. Sevens. It's also very glycolytic, like it's very intense. It's sprint one way, rest 20 seconds, sprint another way, rest 15 seconds. It's a hardcore hit all day training session. So I'd definitely be drip feeding carbs all day. I'd be drip feeding really balanced meals. It sounds really simple, but bit of protein, bit of fat, bit of carbs. Not too big in meals. You don't want to be carrying anything around in the gut. You want your energy metabolism to be really smooth. So I'd probably be snacking like every 1.5 to 2 hours, or where you can in between the games. I would also not, and this is probably a biggie, not use stimulants at the first couple of games. Save them for later. So you should go in, let's say your first match is 11 a.m. You should go into that match feeling pumped, be up for it, and generally be ready. You shouldn't really need any stimulants to make you perform better. So do that for like the first 2 games, and then I would personally, I'd probably maybe use like performance spray, or you could use caffeine, but remember it stays in the blood for 6 hours, so I'd probably use it later on. If it was me on game 3, I'd probably use performance spray, and then on game 4, and the chances are you're going to be playing like 4 or 5 games, maybe 6, I would then have some caffeine, a really strong coffee. I'd make sure there's like 300 or 400 milligrams in it, so like a triple espresso. And I'd throw that in there, so when your body's starting to get a bit fatigued, it's starting to get a bit low, central nervous system activation is declining, that's when you can really have a really high caffeine dose and kind of bring yourself out of the ground a bit. Most people will take caffeine at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's leaving the bloodstream between 2 and 4 p.m, which is kind of when you want to peak. That's when you've really got a graft, and the chances are you're then starting to play the semi-final and final matches. And the last thing you want to be doing is dropping off the face of the planet. So definitely save your supplements. I would have a magnesium bath the night before in your training throughout the week leading up to it. I would probably use recovery spray or some kind of magnesium-based supplementation along with zinc to make sure that you're not, there's no chance that you go into that day being depleted in any way. I'd make sure you're on creatine leading up to the event, and that's probably the way I would do it.
Cool. I have nothing further to add, Your Honour.
Thank you, Your Ladyship.
I have no further questions.
In that case,
no further questions. No, I'm done now.
We'll wrap up the show. Thank you to all you lovely people for listening. It's always an honour being able to talk to you. If you've enjoyed the show, what? Shut up.
I said cheers, Bat.
If you've enjoyed the show, please do me the honour of leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher if you haven't done so already. When it pops up on Facebook and Twitter, give it a share. Share it with your friends and family. Get other people listening. Let's try and help them out as well. Let's try and grow this podcast thing. Also, if you own a gym or a workplace or has a community space, I have a podcast poster. If you wouldn't mind putting this poster up in, let's say, your lunchroom of your workplace or your gym's notice board or anything like that, I would love that. If you could email bencoomber@gmail.com, we'll forward you the poster in a PDF, and if you could print it out and put it up, that would be amazing. Again, the more people we can get listening to this show, the better. So I will be on the show next week with Alex Viana. It's going to be an amazing show. I'm actually recording it later today, which is the day I record with podcast, which is today, which is right now, which is now, which is here, which is So, thank you from me.
Thank you from me.
And if any of you guys haven't checked out Rachel already, do. It's the athleticfox.com, and it's Rachel Guy on Facebook and Athletic Fox on Twitter. Do so, follow her. She's an amazing lady. And I will see all of you lot next week. Ciao.
Ciao.
Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 105. Now, I recorded the show with Anna last week. She was back on the show. It was an incredible show. It was amazing to have her back. It's been a long time. And I don't know if you heard at the end of the show, I thought it was quite amusing anyway. I said, right, next week I'm going to be interviewing these guys called The Minimalists.